the first thing I noticed about the day my life tilted was the shade of the frosting. I'm 25, and I have a strange superpower. I can tell when a buttercream has been whipped too long by the way it glosses in the light. It's an inherited skill. My mother ran a bakery from our kitchen most of my childhood, and by 12 I was decorating cupcakes instead of riding bikes. So as sun slid across our yard and lit the tiered cake my best friend Nadia had ordered, I clocked that the top layer had a slightly too shiny sheen. Something small and human and gentle to think about as my baby shower swelled into laughter and the rustle of tissue paper. That's how I know fate has no manners. It arrives when the frosting is wrong and you're standing in slip-on sandals, feeling both bloated and madly loved. Raya, Nadia called, lifting her phone to record another wave of guests dropping their cards into a glass box. You're glowing in an, dewy goddess way. Come stand by the balloon arch. I'm sweaty, I said, but let her stage me between the blush pink and white balloons she'd arranged into a perfect crescent. Noah better be getting the lemonade like I asked. He is, she assured. And I told him to bring the fancy jar because we are not serving lemonade out of a sports cooler for your baby shower. We're not savages. He's an engineer, I said, smiling. A sports cooler is an elegant solution to thirst. My mother drifted over with 3 napkins. He is a good man, she declared. My mother approves of men in complete sentences. Do not pick at the frosting. I can see it in your eyes. It's too glossy, I said. You always find the flaw. She kissed my cheek anyway and tucked a curl behind my ear that had unhooked itself from my loose bun. You look like, oh, you know who you look like. You look like you at 6, when you insisted on wearing the tulle skirt to the grocery store because, and I quote, a girl must dress for her destiny. That sounds exactly like me, I said, because it did. Back then, destiny meant the display of sugared donuts. Today it meant the baby sleeping inside me like an orchard under snow, branches quiet, sap deep. I was opening the 3rd gift, a swaddle with little sheep, when Noah returned, tall and purposeful, with the glass jar of lemonade balanced against his hip and slices of lemon floating like coins. He angled his body toward mine the way he always did, a gentle geography that said, home is wherever you are standing. You're beautiful, he murmured, pouring into paper cups decorated with tiny gold moons. I'm glossy, I said. Then shine. We've been together 3 years. We met when I interviewed him for a features piece on young professionals yanking our city into the future, an assignment from the online magazine that paid me in exposure and gift cards. Noah's brilliance shows up in a patient way. He solves problems like he's listening for their real questions. I used to think love would feel like fireworks. Loving him feels like waking up in a house already warmed by morning light. So when she walked in, when her shadow dragged behind her like a second, older person trailing, when her lipstick was the exact shade of a bruise turning back to red, my first thought was about light. How quickly it can change. How you can be standing under fairy lights twined around a birch tree, and all at once the day gathers itself and prepares to storm. Is this where all the congratulations are? The woman asked, and people turned because her voice barged into the yard like a new guest you didn't know you'd invited. I didn't know her at first. She was taller than me, willowy in a way that made me think of cattails and the edge of a lake. Her dress was emerald, her hair was the kind of dark that flashes blue in the sun. She held no gift. She held a certainty like a coat she wore even in heat. Noah did a little double take that was at once imperceptible and thunder. He blinked. I felt, physically, his pulse thrum faster through that invisible thread between us. I watched him say something to himself, something like this isn't happening, then I watched him paste on a more careful face and step toward her. Tessa, he said. So the storm had a name. If I imagined Noah's past, it was in watercolor, all the edges blurred. He had told me about her early on, Tessa, a dancer who lived on green juice and ambition, Tessa, the woman he'd dated from 20 to 23, through the chunk of time when passions still run wild and you could mistake turbulence for depth. They had loved each other in the way storm fronts love, charged, quick to break. Then they had finally broken. She had not been in my mind all morning. I had been thinking about diapers. About whether to put rosemary in the lemonade syrup. About how our daughter, because we already knew, would arrive in late November and I would tuck my face into the crease of her neck and learn a new word for belonging. I had not been thinking about Tessa. She stepped past Noah without waiting for permission. She looked at me the way a person looks at a house they used to live in, appraising, proprietary, a flicker of memory behind irritation. So, she said. This is the party. It's a baby shower, I said. My voice is naturally gentle, people tell me it's like butter. Can I help you with something? You can give him back. A murmur rippled the way party sounds change when the music cuts. Someone set a plate down too carefully. Nadia's phone lowered a few inches. Noah said her name again, softer, like he was trying to keep us from toppling into a hole he already saw. Don't do this. Not here. You won't return my messages, she said. Her eyes sparked, she pinned me with a smile that wanted me to see it as clever. He won't return my messages. He's ignoring me. But I am not a woman who gets ignored. We haven't spoken in a year, Noah said, steady. His hand found my shoulder, I felt the weight of it, anchoring or asking for something, I wasn't sure. You emailed me in April, she shot back. You said you missed me. That we aren't done. I paused. April felt like being told the floor had always been crooked. There was a very small, very quiet place in me that said, breathe. Let the truth be itself. And there was my mother sliding smoothly to my other side, as if she knew I might sway. Noah's eyebrows knit in a fury that wore shock as its shawl. I didn't email you in April. Oh, Tessa said. Maybe it was May. The months blur when the love of your life goes and impregnates someone else during a phase. She laughed, high and thin and wrong. He's still mine, she told me. He told me. Silence swallowed chatter like a whale takes air and keeps it. I thought about frosting. I thought about tulle skirts and destiny, and about how much work I'd done in therapy to believe that love wasn't the same as chaos. I thought about how the heat of shame feels identical to anger until you tell them apart. I thought about the folder in a drawer in our bedroom. I thought, so this is why we signed it. Let's go inside, I said, to Noah. To the woman. To the day itself. No, Tessa said. The emails, she said, triumphantly lifting a sheaf of paper like a flag. From him. To me. If you require receipts. She flipped to the first. Look. She read, I dreamt of your hands last night. I woke with your name in my mouth. She smiled. Noah writes rather well when he remembers how. He wrote that April 12th. Noah's jaw tightened, a flare of disbelief and violated privacy and something that looked like grief. Those are not my words, he said carefully. And that is not my email address. Then it is a convincing ghost, she said, and, oh God, she stepped closer, thrusting the page toward me like a bouquet of thorns. I didn't take it. Raya, my mother said in the tone of a woman who has watched me try to rescue injured birds and also watched me learn I could not do the healing for them. Breathe. I am breathing, I said. I looked at Noah, and he held my gaze as if we were the only two people in the yard, as if we were back in our kitchen eating cereal at midnight, as if he was asking me to remember and I was reminding him I did. "Come with me," I told him. We left the murmuring people and the bruised lipstick and the balloon arch swaying a little because a breeze had woken up. We went down the hall, past the framed photos of us on the beach and us in winter hats and us in the hospital when my appendix decided drama was the only way to be seen. We went into our bedroom. My dresser drawer stuck halfway like it does, and Noah yanked it twice, irritated, then gentled, and it slid. "You want the folder," he said. "Yes," I said. He pulled it out. It was the pale blue, with a label that said, simply, Prenup. There were other labels in our life, taxes and mortgage and pricey lens, but this one lived in the quiet place where we put intentional things. It had been Noah's idea, which jolted my mother. "Prenups are for rich men protecting themselves from poor women," she'd muttered, then apologized and made us pancakes to relieve her discomfort. I didn't want to protect myself from him. I wanted to be protected with him. What Noah proposed wasn't the story I thought I knew, not a line in the sand about money, but a document that said, "We are writing the rules for how we break. We are deciding now the promises that will hold if we don't. We are practicing tenderness with our future selves." We'd sat across from each other at the lawyer's table with paper cups of lukewarm water and talked about hard things, childhoods, debts, my stubborn belief I could fix anything with love, his stubborn belief logic could always win. We wrote things like, "We disclose all accounts." We wrote, "We agree to see a counselor if either of us asks." We wrote, "Because I asked, and he said yes without flinching," a clause about fidelity and consequences. We wrote boundaries like fences you paint white because you like to see them, not because you want to keep anything out. And we wrote this, both parties certify, in a sworn addendum, that all previous romantic entanglements are fully and finally concluded, and that neither party is under any obligation to support, in any way, any claim or expectation from a previous partner. Attached are termination letters to relevant parties, drafted and sent, with proofs of delivery. Noah had written that letter to Tessa in the lawyer's office. It had been the last step, like tying a bow, and the lawyer had printed it on thick paper and slid it into an envelope with an embossed return address. Noah had signed. The lawyer had notarized. The assistant had marched the letter down to the building's mail chute like a little soldier. I had watched his hand shake almost imperceptibly when he sealed it. He had watched me watch, and placed his other hand over mine like a pledge. "You're sure?" I'd asked. "I'm so sure," he'd said. Now, in the bedroom smelling faintly of the lavender spray I use at night, my belly round under my sundress, I lifted the folder and felt the thickness of our attention to our own lives. It held the prenup, the addendum, the evidence, a copy of the letter. The typed line, "Dear Tessa, this letter is to formally, clearly, finally close our relationship and any expectations you may have of me." It was not unkind, it was not ambiguous. It had been delivered. There was a proof of delivery slip stamped by the postal service like a small, ordinary trumpet blaring. It arrived. "I want to show her," I said. "You don't have to," Noah said. "I can ask her to leave." "She came to erase me," I said. "I prefer ink." He held the door as I passed. His face was a complicated kindness, pride and apology and a promise to stand 2 steps behind me if I needed it. We returned to the yard where the day had paused like a held breath. Nadia's hand was at her throat, her eyes flicking between us as if we were a high-wire act and she couldn't bear to watch but couldn't bear not to. Tessa stood with her weight on one leg, arms crossed, that stack of papers pressed to her body like a shield. "Okay," I said, and my voice carried easily now, not loud, but shaped for distance. "I hear you. You say he wrote to you in April. You say he promised you were not done. You say he is still yours? Yes, she said, chin lifting, mouth ready to devour triumph. Here is what I say. I tapped the folder. I say you didn't know you were trying to lay claim to a ghost. If this were a movie, the accordion player would start up a tango. In the absence of music, all I had was true things said plainly. I opened the folder and pulled out the addendum, legalese in clean paragraphs, and the copy of the letter. I handed them to her. She did not take them. I handed them to Nadia, who raised her eyebrows, stepped into her role as the town crier, and read. Both parties certify that all previous romantic entanglements are fully and finally concluded, Nadia read, professional now, like a woman who had narrated podcasts in a former life. Attached are termination letters to relevant parties, drafted and sent, with proofs of delivery. This is ridiculous, Tessa snapped. A piece of paper. Like your emails? I asked, still gentle. Nadia continued. Dear Tessa, this letter is to formally, clearly, finally close our relationship and any expectations you may have of me. I wish you happiness that has nothing to do with me. Please do not contact me again. Signed, Noah Archer. Dated June 3rd, last year. Notarized. Tessa went very still. I watched her take in the signature, the official stamp that made the letter louder than a regular goodbye. I watched her eyes falter over the word finally, as if that adverb were a cliff she hadn't expected to see. He sent that, I said, not unkind. He did not come here so you could wedge yourself into our bed. He came here months ago. He left you then. He forgot to tell you in a language you would believe. I don't believe this, she said, and her voice cracked, and there, suddenly, messily, she was a person again, not a storm but a woman with a heart that had rehearsed a different script. Then here, Noah said, and his voice held compassion without performance. He pulled his phone and found the email from our lawyer, the same document scanned, time-stamped. And, he added, here is my inbox. Here are my sent emails. Here are my drafts. He scrolled. There is nothing to you from me. I changed my main email last spring because of a privacy issue at work. Someone spoofed my old one. I didn't think, he shook his head hard, angry at himself, that it would be used to hurt you. She stared at the phone, her own papers drooping in her hands. The great performance of her righteous claim faltered. I watched the theater lights come up for her, how harsh that illumination can be. Who would, she started, but the question tugged at a thread that would unravel into pain that didn't belong to this backyard. A spammer? A bored friend? Her own wishful thinking grown teeth and a keyboard? Sometimes we manufacture our own ghosts. Sometimes the living borrow the dead to keep a plot going where there is none. The yard exhaled. People shifted. My mother handed me a cup of lemonade in the way mothers translate chaos to citrus and sugar as quickly as possible. I sipped. It was perfect. I am not asking you to go, I said to Tessa. But I am asking you to stop telling stories that require me to disappear in them. She pressed her lips together and looked at me with resentment that had let go of its knife. You think you won, she said. No, I said. I think I am pregnant at my own party and would like you to leave me alone. I thought for a moment. Then added, because my therapist would have been proud, and I'm sorry you were alone with a story that hurt this much. For a second I saw the girl she had been, long before lipstick and choreography and the need to stretch grievances into ballerinas. Her chin trembled. Then pride returned, dug its heel in, and she set the papers on the nearest table with an odd, careful politeness. You always like to perform, Noah said, not unkindly. But that doesn't require an audience. What it requires, she said hotly, is a man who keeps his word. He did, I said, and lifted the folder a little. In writing. We watched her walk away, the emerald dress cutting a slash through the green of the grass. When she reached the sidewalk, she stopped and turned. Her face did something complicated, and then she kept going. For a while the party wore its shock like a hat. People put plates down and picked them up again and spoke in low voices as if they were inside a library where the books were juicy. Then my mother clapped once and announced cake, which is a brand of grief management. The top layer of glossed icing held a white sugar peony and a little banner that said Lily in gold. We had chosen our daughter's name for 1,000 reasons, after my grandmother Lillian, after the flower that can live in muck and still insist on beauty. Noah stood beside me, his hand at the small of my back, our bodies sloping toward each other like lines that had found their axis. I'm sorry, he whispered. For what? For every molecule of that. For not changing my email earlier. For not imagining how someone might pretend to be me. For the auditorium in your chest I made momentarily quiet. The auditorium in my chest? I blurted, and then I was laughing, sharp, grateful, because my husband speaks in metaphors when he's scared. You know what I mean, he said. The place that should be filled with certainty. I slid my hand down and laced our fingers, and watched as our families sliced cake and passed it and someone started a game that involved guessing baby food flavors while blindfolded. I married you for the version of you who shows up when things are messy, I told him. I married you for your accounting, the way you add up the truth and offer it to me without rounding. He smiled. I would put that in writing, he said. If I were not terrified of misspelling the romantic part. You spelled finally correctly, I said. Which is both romantic and brave. We ate cake. People fed me advice like hors d'oeuvres, sleep when the baby sleeps, trust your instincts, don't listen to anything anyone tells you. Nadia pressed her shoulder into mine and said, I love when you go all queenly. I don't feel queenly, I said. That's the queenliest thing you've said all day. Later, after the last diaper cake had been admired and the last stroller folded back into the trunk of the last car, after my mother had rinsed the punch bowl with the kind of vigor that cleanses both plastic and souls, Noah and I sat on the back steps and watched dusk put the teeniness back into the fairy lights. The folder was on my lap again, which felt symbolic and also like I was stalling filing it away. I know some people think prenups are planning to fail, I said. I don't think we did. I think we planned to tell the truth when it counted, he said. Even if it felt like a test. Even when we didn't know what the question would be. It still felt like a lot, I admitted. He nodded. I don't think she's a villain, he said. I think she's stuck in last year. Or the year before. We all get stuck in last years, I said, and thought of my father who had left when I was 8 but still, sometimes, walked through my dreams as if he owned the place. He wrote me a letter once in my 20s, I keep it in a different drawer, that said, basically, sorry. Sometimes our apologies come entirely too late, and also they are all we have. Thank you, I told Noah suddenly, and turned toward him. For writing a letter when it mattered. For not making me do all the writing in us. He kissed my forehead. I filed the folder back in its drawer the next day. Life did what it does, it rushed and it trickled. Noah built a crib and swore under his breath at the instructions and then apologized to the crib. I folded onesies in a stack that made my whole body soften. Nadia came over and assembled a mobile with stars that glowed faintly at night like the promise of sleep. Tessa's emails stopped. Then one day, a week later, my inbox pinged, my public one, where my writing about city bakeries and neighborly feuds and the way the library smells lives, and there was a message with no subject line. It said, "You're right." I didn't know he signed anything. I didn't know he could sign something like that and not come running when I cried. I am good at making noise. But I don't want to be the kind of woman who has to crash a party to tell herself she exists. It must be strange to receive this. I just wanted to say, I listened when you spoke like a person who knew where she stood. I will try to stand somewhere, too. I stared at it until the words joked into each other and then apart. I wrote back, thank you. And then deleted that and wrote, I don't know what to say. Wishing you well feels small. But I do. And then I deleted that and wrote, okay. She did not reply. Sometimes okay is the only bridge you need. And then Lily came. Labor was a corridor of time with no windows. Pain like a wave through me and my body remembered that it was an animal which knew where to go. Noah counted the breaths we learned and then threw away the counting when it wasn't useful. The nurse had kind eyes and a vocabulary of both swear words and encouragements that made me adore her in a fervent, immediate way. My mother made tea every hour, nobody drank it. On a Tuesday morning at 4:17 a.m., our daughter slid into the room and gathered all the air into the space she took up. I had never trusted a document more than I trusted Noah's hand on my shoulder in that moment. We came home with the small person and the colossal responsibility wrapped in the same receiving blanket. The first night, she made the noises of an animal and I kept leaping awake to check if she was a deer. The third night, I slept 4 unbroken hours and thought I might start a religion. The fifth day, we went for a walk and the leaves were beginning to brown and I looked at myself in store windows and did not recognize the woman carrying a baby, I recognized her bones. Two weeks later, a card arrived, addressed in unfamiliar script. It had a watercolor lily on the front. Inside, in careful loops, it said, "Congratulations. I hope, one day, I will learn to leave a room before the walls give way. I hope, one day, you will forgive the way I learned late. I am learning the new steps. T." Noah read it over my shoulder. He sighed out something like relief and something like caution and kissed the soft spot just above Lily's ear. "We forgive," he said, not exactly to the card. "We move on." I slipped the card into the folder. Not because it was legal, not because it mattered to a judge, not because anyone would ever need it. Because the folder had become a place where we put proof of who we were when it was harder to be ourselves. Winter leaned into the city. Lily learned to smile and then to laugh, which made me feel the way my mother looks when cake rises perfectly in the oven, that pride like a warmth inside your sternum. We learned the difference between a hungry cry and a bored cry and the simply philosophical cry babies issue sometimes to remind you that existence demands commentary. Sometimes, when the house slept, I would stand in the doorway of Lily's room and imagine her years like beads on a string, one after another, and I would promise her I would be a steady knot. I promised her that the women in our family, my mother, me, her, had learned things about how to be in love without disappearing. On the first sunny day in March, we took Lily to the park. I saw a flash of emerald and my heart stuttered, then kept going. Tessa was across the grass, teaching a little girl to arabesque in a toddler's clumsy delight. She saw us. Our eyes met. She lifted her hand, not a wave, exactly, but a small salute. I lifted mine back. It felt like nodding to the past as if it were a neighbor, amicable, contained. We did not walk toward each other. We had already said what we needed to say. At home, I changed Lily and kissed her belly in the spot that makes her squeak. Noah brewed coffee and sang her a song he insisted was about physics but sounded like a lullaby. The sunlight hit the bookshelf just right and I saw the little blue edge of the folder in the drawer I hadn't closed perfectly. I pushed it shut. People sometimes ask if I kept my composure at the shower because I knew I would be right. As if we only have to be calm if victory is guaranteed. I tell them, I was calm because I have learned to be a room I want to live in. Because somebody's wind will show up no matter how carefully you arrange the napkins, and I would rather be a house than a balloon. And yes, I also tell them, we wrote what we meant and we meant what we wrote. On thick paper, with witnesses, with stamps and signatures. We laced our love with agreements not because we expected to break them but because we wanted a map in case we got lost. When Lily turned 6 months, we threw another party. A half-birthday in our living room, mostly an excuse to hold our friends and eat cheese. I baked a cake because I was out of my mind with sleep deprivation and nostalgia. The frosting was right this time, soft, matte, perfect in the way imperfection learns to be. Raya, my mother said, holding her granddaughter and swaying like a woman who had spent her life in kitchens but still loved a dance floor, you look like yourself. I am, I said. Finally. Noah handed me a knife. I cut the first slice and handed it to Nadia and she picked a crumb off with precise wickedness and said, "What's the moral?" So I can put it on my stories. The moral is, I said, that paperwork can be a love language. And that some storms teach you how to build better roofs. And that frosting is a metaphor for the patriarchy, Nadia added gravely. Glossy and insubstantial. No, I said, laughing. That's just frosting. We ate. We laughed. Lily gurgled from her bouncy seat like a tiny oracle. And when the evening went quiet and the house hummed the gentle hum I'd always wanted for my life, I slipped a hand into the drawer and touched the folder, like a talisman. Not because I needed to be reminded of the threat of storms. Because I liked the feeling of the simple human fact of a promise in print. Because in the end, that's what we had both decided to offer each other, words with weight, and lives that matched them. When I turned off the lamp, the room held, easy as breathing. Noah's hand found mine in the dark, and our daughter sighed in her sleep, and I thought how deft life can be at stacking ordinary mercy on top of spectacle. We had been interrupted inside a day that should have been only about bonnets and binkies and baby games. Instead, we had also been given a chance to look at ourselves and nod. This is who we are when someone insists on a story that erases us. We hold our own and we show our page. And then we turn it. The end.